Hey, what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? This is Rich of Review Tech USA, and I just received my brand spanking new Kodak Zi8 today. And I just filmed some footage with it in multiple resolutions. I did 1080p, 1080p without image stabilization, 720p at 60 frames per second, and 720p at 30 frames per second. And I did them all in a normal brightness situation, so you could see a real world test where you simply put your light on in your kitchen and you will have family and friends over, and you could see how this pocket camcorder will hold up. So enjoy the footage, enjoy my commentary, and leave feedback and tell me what you think of the Kodak Zi8. A full review will be coming soon.
What's going on, kids? This is Rich of Review Tech USA. I got myself some coffee, and I'm recording this now on the Kodak Zi8, which, according to everybody, received rave reviews. I did a lot of research, and this camera got rated the highest. And when I saw it on Amazon for $99.99, brand spanking friggin' new, I couldn't resist it. So I used some Christmas money I got to purchase this, which is what I was talking about last night. And I'm going to do a initial test of the camera. This is 1080p, 30 frames per second. Can't do any higher than 30 frames with 1080p in a normal light situation. Now let's see if this thing is going to wow me or disappoint me. And then after this, we're going to do 720p, 60 frames per second, even though you're not going to be able to see it on YouTube. Then we're going to do 720p, 30 frames per second. And yeah, I'm not doing the QVGA crap, because if you're still filming in QVGA, then you shouldn't own this camera anyway. So, alright. Anyway, I'm done pacing around like a moron. Round 2, 720p, 60 frames per second.
Now, I was going to go right into 720p at 60 frames per second, but I did notice something that alarmed me, and I had a feeling I knew what it was. If you go back and look at the 1080p footage that was playing, if you look at the bottom portion of the screen, the very bottom, you can see that there's like blue artifacts that happen when you move the camera around. And I was right, it was the electronic image stabilization trying to straighten out the picture, and it caused a lot of artifacts at the bottom of the screen, which is not really a good thing. So after I was done filming everything, I recorded 1080p again with image stabilization disabled, and it made a world of difference. Take a look.
Now this is 1080p. I'm not going to film this in every resolution, but this is 1080p without the electronic image stabilization. I just wanted to get this in there too. And I really hear this makes absolutely no difference. Some people swear it does, but most people say it makes absolutely no difference. And I noticed with a little bit of footage on this is that I think it's the image stabilization's fault. It adds some artifacts to the footage, like especially at the bottom of the picture. So I don't know what's up with that. I don't think it's obviously a hardware issue. I mean, this isn't an, old school DV tape camcorder. It's either going to record or it's not. So this is now 1080p without image stabilization. I'm pretty interested to see if it makes a difference, because according to Nixie Pixel, who I watched her review on this, it doesn't. And some other people said it doesn't as well. And in most cases, I've noticed that image stabilization, if it's electronic, not optical, means nothing. But we'll see. Here is 1080p without image stabilization. Let's move on.
Now, that footage had absolutely no artifacts at the bottom of the screen. That was once again 1080p at 30 frames per second with EIS, image stabilization, disabled. So let's face it, folks, electronic image stabilization is useless, and on top of it, it degrades the picture quality in 1080p. A pocket camcorder is not meant to move around that much. You're meant to just hold it still or put it on a tripod. If you walk around with it, the picture's going to be jittery anyway, whether EIS is enabled or disabled, so just don't use it. Now let's move on to 720p at 60 frames per second.
Alright, here we are. I am now filming in 720p, 60 frames per second. This setting is a little bit buggy, because when you use it in 720p, and I have the newest firmware on here, I just went to Kodak to check, unless you have a decent light source, it actually won't film in 60 frames. It'll go down to 30, which is kind of annoying. But what makes even less sense is that obviously the camera's processor can handle it, because say I start and aim at this light, and then go somewhere really dark, like whatever, I can't do it right now, it'll stay at 60 frames. So obviously a bug, not a deal breaker. It is a known issue. I did look on forums, and man, it looks butter smooth on the LCD screen, but we'll see. So once again, I'm going to stop this in like 2 seconds. This is 720p, 60 frames per second. Interested to see what this looks like. Now we're going to go to 720p at 30 frames per second.
Now, unfortunately, YouTube cannot show video at 60 frames per second, but I could tell you from looking at the footage after I recorded it, 60 frames per second at 720p is the Kodak Zi8 strong point. Another interesting thing to note too is that artifact issue with the EIS, or image stabilization, only happens when you're recording at 1080p. So you could leave image stabilization on in any other resolution and you will not have a problem. Now let's move on to 720p at 30 frames per second.
Okay, 720p is one I'm probably going to be using the most, since you can't really see the difference on YouTube between 1080p and 720p, at least from what I've seen. This is 720p at 30 frames per second, and you're not going to be able to see the difference probably, unless there's some kind of software glitch with the camera or hardware glitch. But you shouldn't notice the difference between this and the 60 frames. The 60 frames, because it's being down converted or downgraded to 30 frames, you may see a little more smearing. You can't blame the camera for that. You got to blame YouTube because they only do 30 frames per second. But this is 720p, 30 frames per second in a typical light setting. It isn't ultra bright in here, but this light setting I used for all three: 1080p, 720p, 60 fps, 720p, 30 frames per second. This is a normal light setting you'd use a camera in. You know, if you're at your buddy's house and you were just filming, you know, everyone over for New Year's Eve, this is what you would use. So it'll be interesting to see how this holds up. This, according to everyone that I've PC Tech World and CNET and even, you know, YouTube users that aren't, you know, major, you know, journalism sites, they all said this is the best one out there, so we're going to see. Anyway, this is a short little test of the Kodak Zi8. I'm going to have a full review on this camera, and I'm actually going to compare it heads-on against the Flip Ultra HD, and we're going to see which is the better pocket camcorder. I'm hoping this footage comes out good, because if this comes out crappy, I'm going to be disappointed. Anyway, guys, have a good night. Hope you enjoy this video.
Well, everyone, that was my first impressions video of the Kodak Zi8 1080p pocket camcorder. So far, it seems pretty good. It has its quirks, it has its issues, and it will be interesting to see how it holds up for the next week or so with everyday use. So, like I said, look forward to my full review of the Kodak Zi8 pocket camcorder, where I pit it against the Flip Ultra HD pocket camcorder, and we will see who comes out the winner. Stay tuned.